it might look like, it might come up as saying Go Blue 2023.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, he's live now, so it's going to restart. Yep. Right. Good afternoon, students. So welcome to Scholarship AgHort and Agricultural and Horticultural Science. So this is standard 93105, and I'd like to introduce firstly myself, which is Kerry Allen. I'm with HARTA, the Horticulture AgHort Teachers Association, and we, along with Study It and NCEA, which is New Zealand Association of Science Educators, are presenting these webinars for you to use for your study. So today's presentation is going to be delivered by Mr. Jared Fritchley, and he is obviously covering scholarship and the three topics that comprises. So thank you, Jared, for your help today and for presenting this. And students, if you have any questions or queries, please put them in the chat and we'll get them answered for you. Okay, over to you, Jared. So all the best.
Cool. Thanks for the intro, Kerry. Hey, look, this isn't my normal style of teaching, sitting talking without any feedback. So if there are any questions, please send them my way. So it makes it a little more interactive rather than just me talking to my computer and feeling pretty uncomfortable. I thought I'd start by perhaps talking about, in general, what I reckon the scholarship paper looks like for me. You know, level 1 AgHort and level 2 and level 3, which I also teach with my lads at school here, very much comes down to, you know, you're learning about some knowledge or some content, and how well you understand the knowledge or content sort of ends up being the grade that you kind of get at the end when you go and sit your exam. Sort of a finite or a prescribed course for teachers to teach, and a prescribed sort of amount of learning for the kids to get your head around. Once you sort of get your head around that, you're writing the right answer in the right box, and it's right or wrong, and you get marks for it. Where for my thinking, you know, the scholarship AgHort paper is very much about, you know, the ability for you guys, girls, to think and to write to a certain level. So quite different. So rather than looking for right and wrong answers of my guys, I try and teach them around just the way that they need to think and the way they need to be able to write. And if they can think and process, then, you know, they're in with a shot with it. If they're just looking to recall some knowledge and then go and write it down, then they might find themselves unhappy come February when the results come out. I also try and talk to my lads about, you know, the scholarship paper is very much about the ability to be able to write and convey ideas. So, you know, if you look at the kind of students or the kind of answers we get for our excellence responses at level 1, level 2, level 3, it very much comes down to how well you can organise your thoughts and get them across to the market and, you know, the part C of the exam, which generally speaking, the excellence answer. So, you know, that's where you've got organised paragraphs. It's not a brain dump of ideas. So again, you know, the ability to write at a certain level is also important. So rather than just thinking about the content, we're also thinking about, you know, the way that we think and understanding the issues, and then the ability to convey the issues to the markers. And like I say, very different to the 1 to 3 when it's content. So don't worry too much about sort of getting the answer right with the content. If you're doing level 3 this year, you've done level 1 through the last couple of years, and you're kind of looking at past schedules and trying to make sure that you understand what the markers want. We're not worried as much about the content, in my view. You know, there's the ability for you to show that you understand the content as opposed to writing some stuff. I thought I'd start with the stuff that's in front of us here, which is the stuff that's on the NCEA site. I always try and talk with my lads about sort of just walking through here, and perhaps that way, if I miss something in my discussions with them, they've kind of picked it up from the NCEA site in terms of what we've been told will be in the exam this year. So I'll assume that you haven't seen it, and if you have seen it, I apologise, and if you have seen it, maybe we might learn something together by going through it again. So this is just by going into the NCEA site, going to the subjects link. Maybe I'll do that with you just in case you don't sort of know. So there's the NCEA home page, ncea.gov.nz. We click on the NCEA subjects. We click on the Ag and Hort page. And then we whiz our way down at the bottom. There's a little link here, let's say Scholarship. Click on that there, and it brings us to where we just were. And on there's a bit on the specs, some resources, assessment reports, timetables. But this is our specs for this year's exams from here down. So I'm just going to read it, and I'll presume that you can read, but I'm just going to read it so I don't miss anything by going through. So the paper will comprise of 3 questions that hopefully by now you've kind of learned from level 1, level 2, level 3, that your ability to be able to achieve to a level that you want. So you've got to actually answer all 3 questions. If I make the assumption there's 3 questions and each paper, each question's worth 8 marks, you've got a total of 24 marks, and make the assumption you've got to get more than 12 to be able to get SCOL. If you leave 1 question empty, then you've got to be pretty amazing in the other 2 to be able to get a scholarship. So there are 3 questions. As it says here, candidates are required to answer all questions. There's a good chance that you'll feel really comfortable about 1 or 2 of them, and perhaps not about 1 or 2 of them. But as you know from the old grade school marking, the numbers combine together to form your total grade. So got to give all of them a nudge. Also says here that the questions will have a focus on, and there's 3 bullet points, whether we decide that means that each of the 3 questions will have a focus on one of these 3 things, or however it may look, but these are the bullet points that sort of give us a bit of direction around what to look at. So firstly, we need to understand about export-orientated primary production systems. So hopefully this year in your level 3 course, you've been learning about the milk industry, or you've been learning about growing red meat, or you've been learning about apples or kiwi fruit. So you've got an idea about the ins and outs, the functionings of primary production systems. And there's a good chance, like I say, that you've learned that during the year, or perhaps you come from a farm and you might already know about dairy from a dairy perspective, and you might have learned in class about red meat. So you've got an idea about a couple of different systems. And that's important. I mean, no one's expecting, I don't think, any candidate to walk in and be an expert in a couple of production systems, because you've obviously only been in the class for 4 periods a week for sort of, I'm not sure, 32 or 33 weeks of the year, if that. So you've got a level of knowledge, but sensible level of knowledge. The second bullet point here, issues, perspectives, and conflicts that occur in attempting to achieve sustainable production systems. So, and I always teach my boys, if they listen to me, to be open to perspectives. So, we need to understand or look at what's going on from a point of view of a grower, from the point of view of a processor, from the point of view of the local people that sort of lives in the Hawke's Bay here. A lot of apple production, but we rely on the people in the local community to, be involved in the industry, whether in pack houses, whether it's picking fruit, whether it's orchard managers, whether it's building cool stores, whether it's accommodating workers. Everyone's got a view on it, and trying to bring all those different views into it. Issues, it's never all plain sailing. So we've got issues, obviously, with the lack of labour. We've got issues with accommodation for the labour for this year's issues we'll get to shortly. So just trying to look at what's happening in the media to try and keep on top of things that are perhaps not working as good as they could do. And conflicts that occur. I mean, there's conflicts that we've got at the moment, when it comes to labour. MBIE is working with businesses to try and get people to work, and you've got Ministry of Social Development, MSD, trying to get people who are unemployed into work. So there's always conflicts, conflicts between using workers, automation, if you look after workers, and that's cool for the local community. If you can't get workers, you've got to automate, but it might mean that more people in the local community who are low skilled are unemployed. So just trying to keep a tab on what's going on, in our primary production systems, and from a point of view of sustainability. So hopefully, we're going to be around, whether it's apple sector, dairy sector, sheep and beef sector, artichokes if you're Kerry Allen, to try and make sure that we're here in 5 or 10 years' time, still producing and still exporting those things overseas. And then the contemporary issues that have an impact on the production part of the primary production system. And I always get really quite excited when I see the contemporary issues at the start of the year, to see what our focus is for this year in terms of some of the learnings. I've always probably liked the contemporary issues that the examiners have chosen. And the idea of contemporary issues is they're contemporary, or they're current, or they're actually pretty important to us. for the last 2 years. There's been heaps of information floating around on labour, and we can get to some of those ideas later on when I sort of go through some of my sort of brainstorming of ideas. So that was pretty cool when I saw the idea around labour being one of our contemporary issues, and niche marketing. So candidates have to have a real clear understanding of the two contemporary issues that have been given to us, which we'll get to down here. So understanding their production systems, understanding issues, perspectives, and conflicts to be able to be sustainable, carry on to the future, and agricultural, horticulture for the businesses, for the business itself, for the local community, for the whole of the country, and then also understanding how the contemporary issues themselves are influencing the primary production systems. A few more things here, and I've always said to my boys, if there's words on a page, it's important. So we don't want students to sort of skim over and go, I'll pick out a few important parts and the rest was not relevant. So it says here, candidates will be required to have detailed understanding of two primary production systems from producer to consumer. Primary production system involves the production of one or more products, e.g. sheep system modern produce meat and wool. So I've tried with my guys to talk about dairy, we've talked about apples, we've talked about red meat to a degree, but hopefully using more than one primary production system. So as a candidate, you can compare and contrast. Otherwise, if I only talked about apples, although there's a lot of apples in the Hawke's Bay here, the students become quite one-dimensional and don't understand the production of other primary production systems or primary products. And therefore, they're a bit sort of narrow. I mean, the amount of labour required and the seasonality of labour for apples is a world away from what's required on a dairy farm or a sheep and beef farm. So, having a couple of systems, is important. It goes on here to say that candidates will be required to have an understanding of the following contemporary issues, and these are the two for this year. The cool thing I like about contemporary issues is that it's not the same stuff as last year. So again, I try to give my level 1 boys who've got the exam on Tuesday saying, look, there's some similarities from year to year. The standard hasn't changed, and therefore essentially the questions are limited to how much they can cover. You guys are only here for a year, so therefore trust that it'll be similar to last few years' paper of the degree, where our contemporary issues are different to last year's and different to the year before's, which is quite cool because as a teacher you don't get stale because you're having to go and find out some information about some new contemporary issues. So these are the two that were given to us in 2022. So if you're a student and you're looking back at some past schedules from the last couple of years, it's super cool to get an idea of perhaps what those students did for a scholar answer, an outstanding scholar, or a top scholar in terms of how they organised their ideas and how much evidence they brought and how much they'd actually processed the knowledge and put it into their own words. But if you're going to try and memorise past schedules and then regurgitate it this year or past papers, you'll find yourself pretty low on your grade score because the questions are different this year to for this year's contemporary issues. I sort of said to my boys, the contemporary issues, if you do have a look at back through past papers, these two here aren't the question. So we've got some contemporary issues that the examiners told us to go and learn about, but we won't see, unless I'm wrong, but we won't see that as our question. So it's not really that useful to prepare yourself to walk in and just write down that there. So you're not talking just about the position of niche markets within primary production systems. The exam question will be different than that, but it will be testing the learnings that you've covered around niche markets, and perhaps the position might be the importance of, or where they are, or why they exist for, or the importance of it. But you've learned about niche markets within primary production systems, but you're able to be fleet-footed, or you're able to change what you were going to write down to the question. And the second one, labour issues and considerations within primary production. Again, being able to write about a question that'll be different to that is pretty important to you. So, but if you understand labour issues, and again, I'll show model brainstorm shortly, and considerations, then you'll be able to hopefully answer the question in front of you. And then if you whiz down, there's a couple little folders here. And if you click on those two little folders there, it'll just bring you to somewhere. I'll do it again. If I just hit it again, that one there, and that brings it down to here. And maybe I can just what I did. Here we go. Yeah. And then this is just this is the question booklet, answer booklet, scholarship paper, top scholar and outstanding scholar from this one here is 2020. There's also 2021, 2019, but I've actually got them open. If I squiz across to here, and if I can move that, you reckon? Okay, do that down to here. So here is our question booklet from 2021. I'll do the answer booklet firstly, because that's the easiest one to look at. Here's our answer booklet. And if you look back through past papers, you'll see a similarity between previous years. So don't be surprised when you find yourself a booklet of 24 pages and 22 of those pages are blank lines, or 19 pages of blank line and a planning page. So here's your answer page. This question last year, which is different to this year, of course, is around new technologies in primary production. They've given you a nice big page here to write some planning on. So, it's a bit of a hint, really, that rather than just skipping through here and then starting to write and writing 9 or 8 pages of words here, you've taken yourself a little bit of time. You've leaned back in your chair. You've clicked your pen 80 or 90 times as you sort of start pondering and start planning what you might like to write for your response. So the planning bit there is there for each of the 3 questions, and then the rest of it's just lines. So pretty exciting to show you guys, but don't be surprised when you walk in and there's just lots and lots of lines for you to write into. Question booklet. So there's obviously 2 booklets in the exam: question booklet, answer booklet. Here's our question booklet. And again, all the words on the page are really significant. So take the time again before you start answering the scholarship exam to actually start reading it first. And if we look at the schedule later on, we'll see a few hints there around the structure of the answers, and it does relate to the grade they can give you as well. So, here's last year's. Of course, we can't find the pictures because the pictures were there last year. Someone owns the pictures, and they can't be sitting up on the NCEA site, I think, for retrieval reasons, because they were borrowed from somewhere else. So, here's last year's question on technology, which is different to this year's. The continued development and implementation of new technologies has been a feature of all primary production systems. These changes have occurred at all stages, from production through to processing, distribution, and marketing of the product to consumers. So that is what NCEA would call, a bit of stimulus material. It's just helping the candidate to get their head around that stuff there, but all of it. That there is designed to get your head around what they mean by this thing here. Okay, so again, take time, read it a second time, look at the pictures, and then we get down to the actual question itself, which is this bit down here. This is your question, which you're going to then use your planning 1 page for, and your 8 or 9 pages of writing for, to answer this thing just here. So this question from last year, again, hopefully you read it very slowly, hopefully you get your highlighter or your pen out, and you do some underlining, you make yourself some bullet points, whatever it may be, or you do some planning on the question booklet to answer this bit here. So with reference to which is 1, primary production system, discuss how new technologies have been or are being adopted. So this question here, we're actually relating it to our primary production system. If you remember back at our spec page, it talked about primary production system on the first bullet point. Second bullet point was around sustainability. Third bullet point was the contemporary issue. This here is talking about how our new technologies have been or are being adopted within primary production systems. So if you're looking at apples, as we do in school here a little bit, we might have talked about the robotic picking. We might have talked about, the platforms. We might have talked about, especially now, pack houses, massive amounts of automation, less and less workers there. So things that are happening. And then into the future, we've got more and more kind of work being done, probably a year away from having driverless tractors mowing the rows, and then we'll have driverless tractors doing the crop sensing or the fruit thinning, and then eventually to harvesting. So you kind of understand, you've kind of told the marker in your writing about apple production technologies that are currently there and ones that are coming along. Of course, I haven't answered the last part, which is this little part through here, which is analyze the advantages and disadvantages these technologies pose. It might be there around the initial cost is massive. It might be though that your robots don't call in sick. They don't have weddings on. They work on public holidays. All those kind of things. It might be if it breaks down though, you've got no backup plan for it. So you're just trying to sort of talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and again, hopefully use the planning page to talk about those things. I could go through, but I won't. You've also got question 2 and question 3 there as well. So there's a 3-question paper, an answer booklet, space for 3 questions of planning, and then 3 questions of answers. But the 3 questions a little bit different. That one there had a bit of an intro, had some pictures, had a little bit of a question here. Second question, no pictures. If you like pictures, you're out of luck. You can always draw out, I suppose. But again, there's our question. A little bit here as an intro. This one here, a little bit different again. So all 3 questions are different with how much stimulus material they give you or direction they give you, but you've got to answer all 3. If I just jump to the assessment schedule, I did have a bit of an order I was going to try and cover, so I didn't jump around too much. This is the sort of the mark schedule for the scholarship paper. So again, I'm sure you've all, as a teacher and perhaps as students in previous years, gone through and looked at past schedules, and you've seen, here is the answer for this level 1 standard. The scholarship one, not so much about here is the answer, but here is sort of some examples of some answers. So if I just try and do this one here with you, trying to remember how to look when I looked at it last. So here is the what you do if you don't want to get a scholarship. This is our 1 to 4 marks per question. So question 1, question 2, and question 3. If you didn't quite get to scholarship level, you've got a 1 to 4 per question. A 5 or a 6 is our scholarship level sort of response, and our outstanding is our 7 or our 8 response. So for each of the 3 questions, you'll give an up mark out of 8, 1 to 4, 5 or 6, or 7, 8. If I'm talking too fast, hopefully someone will tell me, and I'll slow down. So below SCOL, the candidate demonstrates some aspects of the requirements for scholarship, but not at the level or to the breadth required. So again, superficial understanding, you don't really understand it, you've written down a few rote learned things, or it was pretty narrow and you didn't cover enough information. 1 to 4, obviously you get a 0 if you had no response to it at all. Students who get scholarship, they would have shown some kind of analysis and critical thinking. So I'm sure if you look at what you've planned or what you're going to write down come exam day, if it just sounds like you're writing down a whole lot of facts that you've learned from somewhere, you haven't shown any analysis. If you haven't offered a view or opinion about what the stuff you've written means, then you haven't shown critical thinking. So it's not just writing down stuff. You've actually processed it, you've analysed it, you've taken some kind of trend out of it, you've kind of projected for what it means, you've shown some kind of critical thinking, you've offered an opinion on it, hopefully not too strong or too different an opinion, but you've processed it in some way. Your integration, synthesis, application of highly developed knowledge, skills, and understanding to complex situations. Sounds pretty complex. So again, not just abstract facts, you're bringing the bits together. So if you're talking about labour and automation, they're not separate things. The more automation we have, the less labour we have. Do we replace labour with automation? No, we actually need a bit of both, because people drive machines don't drive themselves. We haven't got AI, we haven't got some robots that are thinking and like that chess machine that beats people. So they're together. Synthesis is bringing together knowledge, which obviously the stuff that you've learned from speakers or reading or listening, skills and understanding. So again, the understanding part again was what I talked about earlier on. Hold on, it's my kid. Oi, shush. The understanding. So again, you're not just writing things down, you actually understand the issue. So again, hopefully we're not just saying this year, there's not enough labour. Why is there not enough labour? So the why part's the understanding for us. And here we start to get to the logical development, the precision, and the clarity ideas. So the things we might have done for a 1 to 4 and one of our or all of our 3 answers might have been a brain dump, or might have been a rote learn response that you walked in, ignored the question, started writing things down. We're starting to actually think about the question and start to logically write down our sequence of paragraphs. And that's where you might have used a planning page, or you might have a brain that works like a planning page, where you can think about the order that you're going to write your response down. The precision is the accuracy. So again, we're not writing down lots and lots of things, and hopefully within that 9 pages, Mr. or Mrs. Marker, there'll be some ideas. And the clarity, the person who's reading the response understands what you're saying. So you made it pretty clear that we do need labour still. Automation's cool and it'll get us so far, but we won't lose labour, because our labour is the people who put information back into the machines to make decisions. They review what comes out the end of the defect sorter in our production system, and they then recalibrate the defect sorter for its sorting. Or we're still 6 or 7 years away from getting more of our picking being automated, because the technology is not there yet. It's in its infancy. It's pretty clumsy. The machines are expensive, but you can kind of tell them, the marking people, what's going on. So that's the difference between the below skull and skull. So just the ability for you to actually think about it yourselves and process information, integrate ideas, accuracy, and logical development. And we go to our outstanding. So far, as you've been hearing for the below skull and skull, it's not about the content. It's about what you're doing with the information you've learned about. This is my thoughts. Here you've got, again, our perception and insight. So you haven't stated the obvious. You've been pretty clever. You've found a little gem of an idea. So the marker's kind of, looking through my markets and my kids' stuff, and more often than not, you're kind of losing consciousness as you're marking, because it's pretty mundane. And occasionally a kid will say something, and you wake up and you sort of get up a little bit straighter in your seat, because a kid sees something pretty clever. So that's what's required for an outstanding. You've shown some kind of insight, something a little bit clever, as opposed to the, COVID-19, borders got closed, RECs couldn't get in, so therefore it's pretty difficult. Again, for my product, for apples, that's reality, but it's pretty mundane. No one's going to get outstanding talking about REC workers and the border being closed, and all those managed isolation facilities. This all sounds really old now, but it wasn't that long ago. It was still a thing. That's not outstanding information. The sophisticated integration and abstraction. So again, you've pulled ideas together, things that don't look like they fit together, but you're showing how they operate together. So again, just the things aren't a whole lot of individual or separate parts. All those parts come together to make your primary production system work or not work. Independent reflection and extrapolation. So again, what do you see in it? So you're making some observations, you're making some projections, you're stating some things that you're kind of looking at our contemporary issues or our production system or sustainability as being. So again, it comes down to the student being able to reflect on it. Not mum and dad said, or you don't want to listen to one grower or one viewpoint, because that'll be pretty one-sided. If you give enough viewpoints, then we get a pretty good wide range of understanding, and then you can kind of make your own decisions moving forward, what it looks like, taking into account all those views and all those parts. And the convincing communication part is, again, your ability to write a convincing argument. So the markers finish marking your answer, and they go, yep, cool, yep, there is a shortage of labour, or yep, cool, yep, there's always been a shortage of labour, nothing new here, can't get doctors, can't get teachers, can't get plumbers, can't get builders, whatever it may be, but they agree with your response because it's convincing. You've brought information in, facts, supporting evidence, you pulled it together and made a convincing answer, integrating ideas, showing a little perception, and reflecting on it yourself as opposed to just regurgitating stuff. Then down here we've got the question 1, question 2, question 3, and the kind of knowledge. So again, you can't go and learn answer schedule, not that you want to, because last year's different to this year's, which is why I should move on. But just what's required for a skull. Answer lacks structure and coherence. Scholarship, a well-structured, clearly discussed answer. Outstanding, a well-structured, clearly discussed answer with little superfluous material. Okay, accurate to the point, then move on. So that's the answer schedules, and we sort of question answer booklet. And if you want to, you can look at and you can see a scholarship, an outstanding scholarship, and the top scholar award from last year. But again, being very, very careful, because unlike level 1, level 2, level 3, level 3, 91532 has a different context each year. Otherwise, there are similarities each year. But this year, of course, we've got our own contemporary issues, which gives it 2022 flavour, which I think might be this way here for now. So if I show you this is what I've done with my lads back in end of term 1, kind of a bit of a brainstorm with them, and then kind of got a few ideas down for contemporary issues. If you've got any questions, then fire them through so I can answer your questions. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. So we got term 1 version. That was just from the scholarship standard, I think. I wonder if I should touch on a little bit. There's some colour bits here for you, and if you're not colour deficient, you know what the colours are. Otherwise, if you're like me, they look a bit different but similar. But the outcome from a student who wants to get scholarship is the student will use knowledge of agricultural and horticultural science to critically analyse. So you're having an opinion, you're pulling apart the pieces, you're judging all the bits and pieces of it, of the contemporary issues. This year is about labour availability and considerations, and the position of niche marketing within New Zealand farm production systems, sustainability, our farm production systems, and in the global economy, which is, of course, where our level 3 course kind of fits. Level 1, how do you grow plants, how do you grow animals, understanding soils. Level 2, it's about producing for profit, how to increase productivity, yield. Level 3, it's all about responding to the customer or society, is what we do, as opposed to just producing stuff. I won't go through those two because that kind of just comes out of the answer schedule before. Here's some definitions of a sustainable system, primary production system, global economy, critically analysed, but not super important, I don't think. And here's what we looked at with those from the NCEA page. And I'll just whiz on to some of my thoughts down here. So I'll be interested if anyone's got feedback. It's not an exhaustive list. It's me kind of going, well, what do I need to look at with my fellas? So I'll just read through my bullet points. Again, we did this maybe late term 1. So for the last couple of terms in school, whenever I can, I've been flagging to the lads ideas around niche marketing, or ideas around a niche, or ideas around uniqueness, labour. I've been flagging all the stuff that's been in the media around labour and bits and pieces. And I'd call this my backbone. So this is just the ideas, so the kids knew what to go look at. And then from there, we've got to go and get a bit more information. So if I just whiz through here, in case you're sitting there going, I didn't do it in class, or maybe you haven't got a scholarship class at school, or your teacher's not teaching it, you might pick something out of this. Again, any feedback, happily answer some questions. So this is my kind of thing going, okay, well, what do I want lads then to know or think about or understand? So I'll read for you. Apologies, but again, it helps me with some kind of an order. So I define the term niche market. So this is just my view of it, and I'm an AgHort teacher, not a marketer. But it's something special, something unique. It's different from the general or the mainstream market. So somehow you got some uniqueness. Is it small? So is it a niche because it's small? Is it boutique? Has it got a point of difference? Is it quite sort of individualized? Maybe it's a niche because it's targeted at a specific market or an audience. So what makes it special and unique is probably my first bullet point. I kind of said to my boys, again, try to get them to stay conscious in class. Why do niche markets exist? Is it due to having specific market need which are being catered for? So, Ian Proudfoot from KPMG talks about there being no average customer. So therefore, if you're a grower and you just produce apples, then who are you producing it for? Well, no one really. You're just producing apples and you're hoping at the end point someone's there. So is a niche market targeting a specific consumer with specific taste or expectation? So even, awfully simplistic, but East and West in the world have different taste profiles. So therefore, already we're talking a bit of a niche. Is it that some people like their products to be carbon neutral? Is it some people like their products to have, knowing who it comes from? So I know that Mr. and Mrs. Fritchley have a farm and they produce apples, and I'm buying their products. So having some kind of a specific thing that excites the market, I think, is the reason why we have niche markets. A differentiation, something that makes people buy yours rather than someone else's. If I'm going too slow, too fast, tell me, as I'll keep trucking through. Give an example of some niche markets across the primary sector. So again, I try and use my school as a bit of example in class because the boys understand school. So I said, is Lyndon's Farm targeting for a niche? So, rather just being a school, what are we doing that's different? So, but a flash blazer, we have lunches at school, other schools do as well. So, you guys are pretty cool as well. Is it that we have really strict haircut policy? Is it that we try to have high academic results? Is it we offer scholarship wherever available to our kids? Doing these things gives our school a uniqueness than the other schools locally, and therefore, we're able to charge. So, if we're going to charge 12K for a day boy, whatever it might be, we've got to give someone some value for that. So that's trying to give an example that often there's a niche that you're targeting. Pack and Save has a different niche than New World. So, McDonald's is targeting a niche. Craigie Range is targeting a niche. So you kind of got to know that there are individual customers and they have different needs or wants, and you're trying to give them what they're after. And if you give them what they're after, they'll pay you handsomely for it. Or if McDonald's, they'll pay, well, they're not paying handsomely, but you've got a niche. You've cut some people off, you've carved them off, and they're buying your stuff. What kind of things can be done? What difference can you create in your product for it to be called a niche? Again, I gave you some examples: carbon neutral, water footprint, no chemicals. Maybe it's marbling in meat. Maybe it's fat content in milk. Maybe it's because the farm that you're milking from has, 4 kilograms of nitrogen per year being lost from the soil rather than 43. But somehow you're doing something different. What you're doing, maybe you decided you're going to retire 20% of your farm, and you're marketing your product as that. You would have seen Heaps Country Calendar article, heaps of country calendar episodes. The one that got the most triggered responses, of course, was the one with the sheep and the people that used to produce some gin. They were targeting a niche. They carved off a market point of difference. People didn't like them for it, but they were looking to supply a niche market. And that little lady who was making some juices and selling them in her shop in Auckland got pretty excited by it. And she must have had some customers who were excited by it as well. Can all products of New Zealand be sold into niche markets? I don't know. I say no. I don't think everyone has the capacity or the ability or the knowledge to be able to sell it into niche markets. I think there's some pretty intelligent, clever people out there. And there's some people who aren't that clever. But I'd go as far as saying that if you want to, everyone can leverage off the New Zealand brand. So New Zealand brand's got some value in itself. I'll go to the supermarket and I'll pick up something from the freezer or from the shelf, and you roll it over and you'll see where it comes from. And if it comes from Spain or it comes from China, maybe you chuck it back. If it comes from New Zealand or if it comes from Australia, maybe it's okay. So there's different levels of niches, and I think there's also some people really, really leverage against it. Other times not. I tried giving a few examples here that I didn't just say just then, but think about volumes. I think if you've got a massive amount of volume of a product, it's probably harder to sell it into a niche than if you're very boutique, bespoke, or small. Sometimes when we have things that are stored or there's lots of kill steps involved, maybe it takes away the ability to sell it into a high value market because it's no longer fresh, it's no longer just off the tree or just out of a cow, whatever it may be. If you think niche markets are good, why doesn't everyone target a niche market? As I said before, I don't think everyone can. I was kind of pondering last week about sort of NCEA and Apple sector. So NCEA was deregulated 2001, 2002, whatever it was. Prior to deregulation, I'd suggest that that wasn't as much of a niche because everyone was supplying through NCEA. NCEA had a massive volume of apples to sell, and therefore they were just selling quantity of apples. Deregulation, 130, 140 exporters, might have got down now to 7 or 9. Those little small exporters now know their customers or their markets more intimately. So therefore scale or size was important for the growers to be able to go out and find their own markets. When it was NCEA, I think probably a little bit harder because they were much, much bigger and not as fleet-footed to be able to change into the market signals as smaller producers are. Also, I've talked to a few smaller producers, and smaller producers seem to really know intimately what their market looks like because it's their livelihood on the line. It's their farm. It's their processing facility, and therefore if they get it wrong, they lose their business. If you work for NCEA and you get paid a pretty cool salary and you get a company vehicle, computer, cell phone, and a credit card, maybe you're not quite so needy to make it work for you. The commodity markets, that's where everyone's selling into an undifferentiated market. Why they're not so good, low value, I think back in 2009, I'm not sure actually, 2014, 2012, one of the contemporary issues around adding value. I think there's a bit of similarity between the idea of niche marketing and adding value. If you do have a niche and you've got a point of difference for your product, you are, I think, in some way adding some value to it, because people are prepared to pay for your product that's different than others. And then what kinds of people are generally involved at setting up a niche or unique business opportunity. I think these are our people that think out of the box. So I think you're an innovator as opposed to a manager. Manager sort of does things that keeps things ticking along, but I don't necessarily think that they are able to make a uniqueness, carve a niche out, and keep sort of pushing the frontier. These are pretty cool things, I reckon, as well. Buy local, patriotism, organic, direct to customers, like farmers markets. They're all pretty cool niche things as well. That's pretty important for us. Ireland's pretty cool with its Origin Green. Ireland's pretty cool with some of its marketing as well, and direct competition to us. I had a boy I taught, he reckons that when he was in Ireland, working on a sheep and beef farm before he came back here working on his farm, they reckon that, or he said, I'm going to trust him, Sammy, that they'd pay twice as much for lamb from Ireland in Ireland as they'd pay for New Zealand lamb, because they're really, really keen to be patriotic and to buy local. I think the other idea is around customers' buying behaviour. This is around niches. You speak to them with your provenance story. So therefore, if you tell them, this is my farm, I'm fourth generation, we do really, really cool things for the environment, and here are our cows, and they're really, really happy, and there's no bobby cows in our farm, maybe then people will pay more for your product. You've carved a little niche out, you made some uniqueness, because you've told them about how it's produced. Sustainability. There's some pretty cool statistics out there about how many people now are searching for sustainability when it comes to buying products. So it's not just sort of the greens that are in sustainability. Customers out there are as well, of course, because they are people, they are voters, and they're also people who buy our products. A few more things there. Hopefully not getting too boring for you, but hopefully there's some things here maybe you hadn't pondered, and you've got yourself 3 days to sort of go away and have a bit of thinking about them. So niche markets may be very small, maneuverable. Our bigger corporates, what does it say there, who cannot respond to change very quickly. So again, about being small means you can be a niche. My school, again, small class sizes. If we get really, really big, I won't then be able to know everyone's names. You don't know their parents as well. So being small is pretty cool as well. I think there's an element of risk in doing things differently. So therefore, a lot of people are quite happy doing what they've always done, as opposed to trying to carve out a niche, trying to be the first carbon neutral, the first person to retire X amount of their farm, the first person to do something or other, because there's risk in doing it. So that's why everyone's not running off and doing different things. Moving from niche to mainstream or not. So does a niche eventually become mainstream? Doing cool green things used to be cool 10 years ago. It's no longer cool to do green things. The market expects it. So you've got to keep looking for new point of differences. Otherwise, people get bored with your products. So you can't afford to just become like everybody else. That's their whole product life cycle from a new innovative product, and keep innovating. Growing diversity. This is just my view. I don't think there's any longer any. Proudfoot obviously mentioned it. There's no such thing as average customer. Customers now have a massive difference in opinions on things. Someone will go in the supermarket and they'll look to buy the cheapest eggs. My wife will go in the supermarket and she'll buy the dearest eggs, because happily, she thinks that the hens will be happiest if they cost more. So there's difference in customers. You're trying to carve a niche out to satisfy those customers, and a lot of people buy with their hearts, but not everyone does. So recognizing diversity is important, because again, if you just target everybody, you miss everybody. If you are producing free-range eggs, and the Bostocks do some pretty funky stuff here. If you Google them with their free-range chickens, where their chickens run around under apple trees, bit of a dust bath here and there, have a few apples, have a few insects, but they leverage off that, but they're expecting you'll pay them for it, because if their cost of production is higher, if their their yield or the amount of chickens per hectare is lower, it costs them more, therefore they've got to sell it for more. But if there's customers who pay more for it, there's still profit in that. The margins, that's the important part. Socio-economic factors driving niche markets. As people get sort of pretty well off, They can afford to buy cool things. It'll be interesting what happens next year with inflation globally, continuing as it is, whether the middle of the world population stop having that extra income to be able to flash around. The people, of course, are super mega rich. They'll still be able to afford to buy stuff, but there certainly is some issues, I think, moving forward when it comes to people paying extra for cool things. Can you afford to pay extra for cool things if you can't afford to put your power on? And if I'm not sure recently what it's been, but there was a 700% increase in the gas price in Europe due to the war in Russia. So therefore, are those guys going to pay extra money for some pretty cool labeled butter or some different brand of apples that cost more, or will they go back to buying anyone's butter or anyone's apples? Personalizing food for customers or consumers, again, niche marketing, differentiating, doing things differently, knowing what motivates customers, go and talk to the customers, what excites them, what do they want to buy, and then working backwards, which is a level 3 course to make sure you satisfy their needs. Advantages, disadvantages, I just talked before about, obviously, there's risks to it. There's capital to get started. You've got to be clever enough to know what your niche looks like. You've got to be able to have a relationship with your market. Are you able to keep changing market changes? It's not all positives. There are risks involved. I talk with my guys about sort of milk. So obviously you've got milk coming from cows, which we kind of call our normal kind of milk. And then we've got the alternatives, the soys, almonds, oat, and coconut. But, the niche markets can be cannibalistic. So, does everyone start buying soy? And then after a little while, you get some new stuff into the market and everyone starts to buy the new thing and you're just the old thing. So, just so people know that milk's milk, and some people might go back to buying milk from a cow and away from your soy, almond, or oat or coconut stuff. So, it's not all plain sailing for them. Couple more. There's a few more. Our blue ocean strategies. I talked to the boys about a blue ocean strategy is the idea that you've got clear water in front of you. So a blue ocean versus a red ocean. A red ocean means the ocean's bloodied, which means it's really, really competitive. Lots and lots of producers in the same market fighting for market share. It's a race to the bottom because you're cutting each other's throats for price. With blue ocean strategy, you've got a uniqueness, you've got a point of difference, you've got clear water, there's no competitors around, and therefore you're likely to be successful because you're going to get higher prices and you're there by yourself. Value versus values. I think a lot of customers are value driven, so they'll go and buy on price. Equally, a lot of customers are values driven, so therefore they buy because the chickens are happy. They buy because the cow didn't get slaughtered when it was 4 days old, or whatever it may be, and it was growing up and it got killed at 2 years old, but it had a little bit of a life still. So therefore they buy that person's milk because you're in the bubble guts. So just understanding that, knowing what motivates the customers. And if you want to sell a high value product, you need to understand the values that the customers have, and then obviously giving them what they're after. Sustainable products have got 5 times market growth. I forget where that came from. It came from somewhere. So therefore, if you're producing something which is not sustainable, I think I mean there by the environment, then at some point you might find yourself in trouble. I don't know where that might be. Where if you recognise that punters out there looking to buy sustainable products, if you're giving them what they're after, then you'll keep selling your product, or perhaps you sell it for more, or perhaps you'll be allowed to keep producing it. But who knows? Again, 2023 is going to be very, very different to 2022, which was very different to 2021. When we go from a sort of 2021, everyone's paying moo money for housing and don't mind buying very expensive bottles of wine, take their wife out for dinner, maybe buy some flowers if she's lucky, to maybe 2023, if you can put food on the table and you can pay your power bill and your rent, for some people it might be a challenge. So is sustainability linked with our sort of our happy times of 2019 when everyone's sort of seeing this massive growth in everything, salaries, house prices, everything. If you haven't had a chance to look through some of the KPMG stuff, some really interesting stuff for me in Proudfoot. I know it's a little bit dated, 2015, so I had less grey hair. Little progress has been made in realising incremental value driven by the attributes of our products, customer relationships, innovation and branding. There is a perceived lack of understanding of what is required to market our products in a rapidly increasing world. So to me, what he's saying here is we don't know as producers or as marketers how to extract value from our products, how to tell our customers how cool we are and what we do, and get paid for it. So I put it down to a bit of a people issue, or a bit of a blockage in our businesses being able to exploit. I think you also might have used the words tuning, as opposed to producing wealth. So working really, really hard for no real gains for it. Some producers look to niche production markets due to increasing profit from continuing with status quo or decreasing profit. So if you're seeing your margin being eaten into from just being a producer of your product, maybe if you can make some uniquenesses to get close to the customer, maybe then you can add a bit of value, hopefully more value added than your costs have been, but maybe it gives you a little more sustainability into the future. Some producers are sick of the constraints, regulation, or status quo. Some producers saw that how they were producing was not going to be successful in the long run. So they look to change now. The old saying, what got you here will not get you there, holds true. So again, not just carrying on doing what you've always done, producing that same, nameless apple, or just producing milk. Maybe there's some sort of a difference that you're doing. See, buddy, to have customers getting excited and buying your product. This little one here, get away from being a price taker. So, if you've got no point of difference and your apples or your milk or your red meat is no different from anybody else's, you're a price taker from the market. They dictate to you what your product's worth. Where perhaps if you're able to produce some uniqueness, you've got some point of difference, you've created some scarcity, and then maybe someone's prepared to pay a bit of extra for your product, rather than trying to drive your price down by using some competitors against you. I'm going to start skipping a few. I reckon this is pretty important. Need to be a good producer and love consumers in order to be successful. Relationships are crucial. So I reckon when it comes to niche marketing, relationships are really, really important in order for them to be able to know who you are, whether it's relationships with the customers, relationships with your importer, relationships with your marketer, whoever it may be, to be able to tell your story, pass on the cool things. I'll stop in a mode and you can chuck in any questions. KPMG agenda suggests value creation grows exponentially the closer you get to customers. I reckon the last one here as well around the your own leadership attributes. People who are good at adding value, exploiting niches or creating niches aren't just managers. They've got some real leadership characteristics that understand what it makes to be businesses successful. Kerry.
Hello, just a quick question. So someone in the chat would like to know, would a market that isn't sustainable and purely focused on producing the cheapest product considered a niche market? I've put it in the chat.
I'm not an expert, but I think the fact that it's a niche is, and this is just my view, is because it has uniqueness. So I think if it hasn't got some kind of uniqueness, that it's not special, that it's not going to be a niche product. But I do think, though, and this again, just my view, that everything that comes out of New Zealand already has a pretty cool brand association. I don't think people necessarily in Asia knew about New Zealand really, really well 20 years ago. But, we've been in market now for a while. We signed our free trade deal with China in 2008, which was 14 years ago. And they're getting pretty aware of what New Zealand looks like. So even if you're just a producer of a product from New Zealand with no real uniqueness, I reckon you could leverage a little bit on, and I hate this word, but I'm going to say it, but please don't tell it back to me if you see me in the street one day, because I'll feel embarrassed for saying it. But, the clean green image, people do think New Zealand is a country where there are lots of sheep running around the roads and stuff, and you've got to drive slowly because you're sheep, and we're covered in trees, and kiwis are not flying, they can't fly, but running around everywhere. So I do think there's a certain amount of kind of leverage off our story, but I don't think we could call it a niche market. I think a niche market means you've carved something off just a whole market. And again, I keep using apples as an example, but if you're just producing apples, then I think that you are producing a commodity. Although again, all of the apples coming in New Zealand have low chemical residues because they all are produced under the Apple Futures program. But then if you're producing some of those cool varieties that have got PVRs or plant variety rights, you've actually now got a uniqueness because only you can grow them if you've paid for or if you own those variety rights. If you were to, band together with a few other little buddies who produce apples and you market them under your own brand, and maybe you come from the Hawke's Bay and you market yourself as being 3 families and 3rd generation and from the Hawke's Bay, and here's a picture of our climate and here's, our farm and stuff, then I think but again, what's different about what you're doing than somebody else's? Is your niche, in fact, I don't know. To me, I think you've done something different than everybody else. I've got everything on my feet. What could be like? So for dairy, I had fortunately a boy in my class. His dad runs Westland Milk, and he was in class yesterday having a chat to the boys. They're trying to do some things that are niche and are different and uniqueness to everybody else's with their branding. So their branding was their difference. They're grass fed, they're pasture based. So maybe it's not a lot different to everybody else's, if I think on my feet here, but the fact they're telling that story is making people think it's different to everybody else's. But then they're trying to sell their grass-fed or their pasture-based story, because a lot of the cows farmed overseas are farmed on grain, and therefore their butter looks different, smells different, tastes different, because it's white butter as opposed to the butter that we kind of picture. So maybe they're just telling a story about theirs better than everybody else, and everyone else is just selling butter without telling their story, which creates uniqueness. If I got in a circle there, if I kind of answers a little bit there, Kerry?
No, you've definitely answered that. Yeah. No, that sounds good.
I don't know. It's hard. I mean, I'm not sure that there's a really, really clear answer for what a niche looks like. I think the challenge for my guys and for everybody else is to be able to perhaps share what their view of a niche market is. And like I say, I think that New Zealand by itself is a little bit of a cool story to tell. But maybe it's cool that we are from New Zealand, but maybe the ability to convince someone to pay more for it because we're from New Zealand and what's our point of difference is maybe what creates a little bit of a niche. If I just carry on, and if just jump in if I'm talking too long, or if you've got some questions on it, and I'll try and answer it. But I'm not an expert. I'm an AgHort teacher, not a marketer. Although that'd be a pretty cool job. So here's some ideas I come up with for the labour issues and considerations within primary production. So again, this is our second contemporary issue. So again, some stuff that was different to 2021, different 2020, different 2019. So hopefully you've had a bit of a ponder of what these things here could look like in class. And if you haven't, then maybe it's your chance to have a bit of a look. Again, a bit of a brainstorm, a few things here. So the first thing I sort of thought about was the importance of labour for primary production. So to me, it can be pretty intensive, can be difficult to automate, is that even a word, that way I've spelled it, or to get robotics. Again, for me, for apples, if you can't pick fruit, it's of no value hanging on the tree. So to me, labour is massively important. We can have some really, really cool sunshine hours in the Hawke's Bay, not today, it's cloudy. And we can have some really, really cool plant variety rights. We can have some really cool soils, some knowledgeable growers, a whole lot of really, really, I don't know, boats coming to the port, having an inland port with the containers and stuff. But if we can't get the fruit off the tree through the pack house, it's of no value. So labour is a really, really key thing for the horticultural sector. It also goes into, if you ask me, grape production, again, massively important for labour. As you're probably also aware, sheep and beef and dairy also needing labour units, but not the same when it comes to seasonality. But again, if you ain't got workers, how do you get the milk out of the cows? Labour is pretty important for us. And obviously, labour can come from a range of areas, which we might get to shortly. I do try and talk to my boys about the differences between industries. So again, one size doesn't fit all, which I think is also what the examiner's keen on by talking about primary products. So making sure that we cover more than one. If I just talk my boys about apple production, then they might think everyone is really, really seasonal and everyone needs lots of workers at certain times of the year, where it might be that your labour requirement is pretty stable, or it's seasonal, but not to the same degree the apple producers. So the difference between industries when it comes to the labour volumes, or perhaps the skill level or the haircuts or whatever it may be that you'll tolerate on your system. Again, I reckon the seasonal demand. So again, for the apples here, I know this is a bit brutal, but they need heaps of staff for a small period of time, and then they want them to go away because they don't want to pay for all of their staff to be there year round. So you don't want to pay someone a salary or to get paid every single week. There's periods of the year where you need them, and there's periods of the year where you don't need them. Other systems, like I'm not an expert in all systems, but some of them are far more consistent for the need of 0.5 of a labour unit on your farm for the whole year, or there's 2 on your farm for the whole year. There's times where it's busier and quieter, and perhaps you could do some jobs during the quieter times, maintenance jobs, and then using your staff to actually do your farm work when it comes to your stock work in the busier times. But I think seasonality is a factor which puts some impact on it. If I owned, I don't, otherwise I wouldn't be teaching, the local Ford dealership, and if I've got 5 sales staff, I have 5 sales staff year round. If I own a McDonald's franchise, which I don't, again, I wouldn't be teaching if I was, I might have 25 staff working in my business all year round. It's not seasonal. People buy McDonald's because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon or it's a Saturday night, not because it's February or it's July. I also had a bit of a yarn about lads about the unemployment rate. And this was back in term 1, term 2. I think we were 3.2% unemployment. And according to the experts, maximum sustainable unemployment is 4.7, which means that any lower than 4.7, there's no one available. So if we've got unemployment of 9%, then you've got people who are out of work looking for work. And if you put a sign up or an ad saying, I want staff, you'll get people walking or driving up and saying, I want your job. When we're below 4.7, it means that there are no people looking for jobs. The people who perhaps aren't in work are either lying in bed, overcoming their hangover from last night before they start drinking again today, or they are people who have left a job and then they're going to a new job and they're between jobs, for 2 weeks, a month, whatever it may be, between jobs. So at the moment, we've got very, very low unemployment, which means it's pretty hard. I try and give my boys some examples. There's been plenty of cafes and restaurants in the Hawke's Bay here that have little signs in the window saying full-time work required, full-time employer wanted, part-time people wanted, or they're closed on Wednesday when they normally just close Monday, Tuesday. They're closed for 3 days. They haven't got staff. I was down Queenstown for the holidays, and I was amazed at the amount of businesses that had reduced hours or reduced opening days because they couldn't have staff. So, that's a competitor for us. So people who are involved in agriculture will happily go and do other jobs. You can't get chefs, you can't get tradies. If I was looking at getting a job and you're going, should I go farming? Should I go and get a trade? Which one pays more? So unemployment rate means everyone is looking to get staff and no one can get staff. And then that's ignoring, I'm not sure if I get to later on, that's ignoring the fact that we've got a lot of people who have been locked up for the last 2 years not doing OEs, who want to jump on the plane and go overseas. That's going to mean there's even less people who are workable, people who are able to work, want to work, who will be here working. And so that puts pressure on it as well. We also know a lot of people jump on the plane, fly into Australia to get jobs because they get paid 20 or 30K more as a teacher, and other jobs are the same. So unemployment rate's pretty low. That's got to have some issues or some impacts on our primary production sector when it comes to finding staff. I talked to the boys about, again, this is labour availability and considerations. Minimum wage. So we've seen massive increases in minimum wage under the Red government, which makes labour more expensive. So if you're a business, labour now costs you more. Minimum wage increases doesn't mean that only your minimum wage staff increase in value. Everyone wants a pay rise. If I'm the guy who manages a whole lot of staff and they've got a pay rise, I want to get a pay rise too, because I don't want them getting closer to me. I want to be the same distance away from them, getting paid for what I know. So therefore, minimum wage has a flow-on effect for all parts of the business. But again, labour now costs you more. So if your costs have increased, maybe it links back to the niche marketing. If it costs more to do business, your margin's disappearing, you need to sell your product for more in market to remain profitable or keep yourself at similar profitability. Again, sorry, apples, bin rates. many pickers get more than minimum wage. So, we hear some horror stories about, people getting paid minimum wage and how terrible it is. But, we've got workers who will pick twice as many bins as they would get paid for if the minimum wage, and they get paid pretty well per day because they get a bin rate. So, therefore, that's a bit of an incentive to work harder if they're getting picked a bin rate rather than getting paid minimum wage. If you pay some minimum wage to pick apples, imagine them picking an apple one at a time and walking back and forward to the bin. They could do, because you pay them an hourly rate. We pay them a bin rate, they're working harder to fill bins because they're getting picked per bin. So, labour availability considerations, motivating your staff could be a thing. Don't really get into this too much, but this is more a question, which is my disclaimer there. Are we exploiting Indigenous labour from the South Pacific? So when we're bringing in RECs from overseas to do work for us, or if we're bringing in foreign workers on work permits, are we exploiting people from overseas, or are we actually contributing and helping them out? No right and wrong answer, but we certainly are getting a lot of infill people coming and doing jobs for us because Kiwis aren't. Is that because Kiwis are lazy? Is it because Kiwis won't get out of bed for that much money? Is it because these guys here don't get paid much back home and they get paid a lot more in New Zealand to do our medial jobs? Are we exploiting them? Plenty of articles. It's not in front of me. Maybe it is. Doesn't matter. Where MBIE's been in, which is Ministry of Business, Ministry of Innovation, Business Enterprise, investigates or looks into employers who have RSEs who are exploiting them. They're living in a garage somewhere. They've got 40 people sharing a toilet. They're taking lots of money off them for accommodation or travel and stuff. Are we actually exploiting them, or is it mutually beneficial? Again, no right and wrong, but really interesting to ponder. I always wonder how much we work with and develop labour within New Zealand. I think there's a two-pronged approach. I think when it comes to labour anyway, getting and utilising people from overseas, but also growing our own people. So making sure that the profession is attractive to bring people in, which was one of the reasons why Kerry and St Paul's in the get-go got the AgBiz course underway, was to try and attract a wider range of people to the agricultural sector, because there are a lot of jobs there, and a lot of really highly skilled jobs and highly paying jobs, and making sure that we've got Kiwis going into that area as well, rather than just foreigners from overseas. I've always found this interesting, but I'm not an economics teacher. If we can't get labour, surely if you raise the pay rate, and it's awfully simplistic idea, please don't hammer me. But if you can't get labour, if you pay more, you'll get some labour. I know that's simplistic, and some people don't agree necessarily, but there is some kind of honesty in that. So but at the same time, if you keep raising the minimum wage, or if you keep raising your pay rate to compete for people, does your business become unprofitable? But there must be a certain degree of, if you want people, you pay for them. There's some really, really interesting statistics out there at the moment. I think was it builders, or just the general pay increased by 29% this year. The amount of businesses now that are allowing people to work from home. The amount of businesses now that there's a school in Auckland that I heard of, and they're buying houses as fast as they can to get housing for their teachers to be able to live and work around the school. So if you can't get people, maybe you've got to find a solution to it, and maybe it's not just a matter of stamping your feet and expecting someone to fix it for you. This is always brilliant in class. You get some real strong views in different directions. There's certainly some different views from National and Labour. I think Labour had some kind of a immigration reset during COVID. Now, if you've been following it, they've just allowed not just the RSEC scheme to continue this year, but they've actually increased the cap on workers coming in from overseas. But certainly a lot of political sort of ideas around minimum wage, around treating employees, around businesses succeeding and stuff. And again, just they're all good views to have, because they all form part of the puzzle. And if you're a business owner and you can't get people, then you're hoping next year in September there's a change in government, because just listening as well to a little podcast earlier on, a lot of investors into property will be, if they see the numbers leaning towards a national government in September, they might start buying some more houses again. where if the government looks like it's not going to change in September, then a lot of investors will get their hands on their under their bottoms, because National talked about removing the tax deductibility or putting the interest rate tax deductibility back in. So, there's a lot of useful ideas around the politics of labour, minimum wage, supporting business, listening to businesses when it comes to making decisions. REC scheme, to me, if you're not familiar with that, you should have a look at it. This is the recognised seasonal employers scheme. So it started back in 2007. Some growers and some processors couldn't get enough workers for their business to better function, and essentially, I think it started off with the King of Tonga needing some work for his people. And so there was a bit of a symbolic relationship there where both of them benefited. They needed work, we needed workers. So there's a scheme where you have to apply and get granted the ability to have workers from overseas coming and working for you. 7 months of the year they come and work for you, then they must go home. And how that's benefited the primary sector in New Zealand. I sat in the car with a guy about 6 or 8 years ago, and his words were, a lot of the investment in the Hawke's Bay in the primary sector was on the back of the REC scheme. If the businesses didn't have confidence in getting enough staff, they wouldn't invest, they wouldn't build, they wouldn't keep planting. So REC scheme has been pretty significant, at least for the horticultural sector in New Zealand. COVID-19, again, I said earlier on, feels like a little bit of a historical thing, and in some ways it is, but it certainly still has impacted us. I think luckily, when did it come in? 2019, 2020? I'm not too sure now what year, 2020. Fortunately, we were in the Hawke's Bay here a week or two away from picking apples. COVID-19 came, there's a whole lot of discussions around border closures, people going home and stuff. But fortunately, a lot of workers didn't go home and they stayed throughout that period. Those that went home couldn't come back. As you know, in your schools, if you're a teacher and you had international kids at your school, you couldn't get new internationals. If internationals went home, they couldn't come back. So a lot of schools kept the internationals in their hostels so they could keep taking money off them. So COVID-19 certainly interrupted movement from workers overseas. So therefore, there was implications for the REC scheme. So therefore, there was a lot of hurt here in the Hawke's Bay, and I'm sure wherever school you come from, you would have heard equally as well, shortages around workers. A lot of trees here didn't get their fruit picked. So you've got growers who prioritised what fruit they were going to pick and what they didn't pick. And they also spent some time digging out trees. There was no point in having trees growing fruit and doing some developments in a year or two's time if they didn't have workers. So they basically fast-tracked and brought forward some of their redevelopments. A few more, and again, hopefully this is useful for you. Otherwise, it's just me talking to myself in front of the computer. Lots and lots of technology replacing labour. There's been robotic sort of milkers for a while. How mainstream that becomes, Kerry will know. They might have also heard about sort of the halter, collars. Again, how much will that sort of come into play? So the drones for monitoring stock and stuff. For fruit pack houses and stuff, massive amount of technology. Out in the orchard, massive amount of technology. So, there is technology replacing labour. It's not a bad thing if you're replacing people that you can't get anyway. And whether that carries on like it currently is as a thing, we're trying to find technology to replace labour, or whether there'll be sort of more RSS coming back in, the pressure comes off. At the moment, technology costs more than labour, but of course labour is costing more, minimum wage increases. I might get down to it shortly, my little ideas down here, but 12 days now, public holidays, 4 weeks a year paid leave. You're paying workers a lot now to stay home, and then bless her, the old Queen passed away, and then you were paying workers to stay home again. So all those things are things that you do when you're paying staff. Technology doesn't have a day off when the Queen dies, doesn't have 12 days a year public holidays, doesn't have 4 weeks a year annual leave to use. So technology is a thing that's out there. Obviously hear about a loss of revenue locally, so obviously it's our local GDP. Businesses get hurt when we've got these pickers, and obviously nationally as well, implications for the whole of the country when it comes to balancing our books. And as we know, the primary sector was still making us, everyone in the country, money when the country was closed, because we were still exporting goods overseas to international markets, and the tourism obviously dried up to almost nil, unless, of course, you wanted to come to New Zealand, stay in a shitty motel in Rotorua, and then, I don't know, travel around New Zealand and then travel back home and perhaps stay in a shitty motel back home. So, there's a lot of loss of revenue when we can't get workers. So workers are pretty important to our whole country. I used to wonder if we could actually utilise and leverage off ethical pay and supporting overseas workers. Is it a form of aid to the Pacific? Well, we know as a country we chuck some money at the Pacific Islands as aid money. Is having labour units here also some kind of an aid to the Pacific? Is that something we can leverage off and sort of talk about? I think, again, just an AgHort teacher, investment in the industry is likely to happen with business certainty. So, are we seeing businesses investing, or are we seeing businesses pulling back with a lack of certainty? In the apple sector, we've got both. Again, apples, apologies. Some of our local guys around here are still planting, with the idea being that it'll work out, that they'll get some favours from central government and we'll get more workers. Others are pulling back on their investment because they're not certain of what will happen. And again, maybe that will change with numbers moving through 2023 to what happened in September. But we need investment. We need increase of our productivity. We need increase in high value products. So we want to have investment in the primary sector, not just in housing. But a crystal ball gaze. What will our production systems be like in 5, 10, 20 years? Are we still using RECs? Do we have a viable workforce within New Zealand? Are we happy that we have an open market of people moving freely around the world looking for work? Kiwis going overseas, obviously people coming to New Zealand. Is that okay? Will we have, for our apple sector, 2D plantings, automatic pickers, drones for monitoring stock, robotic milking? Do we need pack houses? So, trying to just crystal ball gaze, I think it's a little bit naive to think that will be the same. So as a grower, being brave, hopefully making some decisions around getting your own labour, building accommodation for labour, automation, not needing labour. Do you choose a certain breed or a certain variety to not need as much labour? Once-day milking, run twice-day milking. Those are all the things perhaps that are in your head kind of working out what the food might look like. Must be a few more to go. To me, again, just looking at some of the things that are happening, house prices, not so flash if you're reading the market report currently, but we're obviously really high, which means accommodation costs were higher. If you could get accommodation, so if you're bringing workers in or you want staff, that's an issue. You can afford to pay your staff less if they're working on a primary production system in Southland because the cost of a house is less. Got to pay higher wages in an area where the cost of living is higher, even having to build accommodation. So again, you can't just chuck your workers now in some backpackers with 15 people per room. There's ratios of beds to rooms, of beds to toilets, showers and stuff. Otherwise, you can't get RECs in. So, housing is an issue for primary producers. I mean, I look at it, if you might have got involved in apple production because you like apples, you might have, or grown apples, you might have got involved in, sheep and bee farming because you like motorbikes or you like dogs, or you like rid of swan dry and gumboots. But now if you're an apple producer or if you're a grape producer, you need to manage a fleet of vehicles. You need to manage staff. You need to have accommodation. You need to be able to have doctor or someone to keep your staff from getting sick. So, lots and lots of stuff that are more than just probably what you got involved in the industry for. Talked about that already, I suppose, sunshine wages. We've got lots of plantings in the Hawke's Bay, again, for apples that are 2D plantings or high density, no ladders, no platforms. So we're getting away from workers. Does everything go back to normal? There's a certain degree of normality, really, if we're going back to the REC scheme and increasing it by 2,000 workers. So there is a certain amount of normality. And I'm sure tomorrow morning the sun comes up, and I'm sure on the Monday of your school exam, the sun comes up. So I don't think everything's just going to fall over. But I guess where will that equilibrium sit? Again, I mentioned already next September, the election. So much comes down to what happens in the election. And if you've been following the news, it's always interesting when you wake up in the morning and you can't bother getting up. Winston Peters is around again. So he's jumped on board with the greenhouse gas emission stuff, and he's jumped on board as well with the governments you can't trust. So he wants some votes and things. So really interesting looking at that, because that will change the confidence of the primary sector investing moving forward. And again, this is about primary production systems. Our shortage of labour isn't a New Zealand issue; it's global issues. You can find plenty of articles everywhere of businesses struggling for labour. So it's not a primary production thing; it's not a New Zealand thing. Generally, there's some struggle there. This is a bit historic, but there was $27 now being paid for cleaners in Queenstown because they couldn't get it, and they had motel wings closed. Career choice made at school influence primary producers labour supply. We want kids to get involved in the primary sector, but hopefully, it's an attractive industry. It's not just milking cows and picking apples in the primary sector. There's plenty of managerial roles. There's plenty of innovation roles. There's plenty of scientific roles. There's plenty of marketing roles. I'm sure if you've got an angle that you're interested in, there'll be a job for you in the primary sector. As a boy, I messaged because I've got Jared Hickey speaking to my class tomorrow in the morning. A boy I taught now works for First Light Meats, and he's in San Jose in California working. So there's some pretty cool options, not just like I say on farm in New Zealand, but still as part of the primary sector. Urban shift out of urban areas, out of rural areas. So people are moving to urban areas. Maybe there's some better nightclubs there. Maybe there's some better beer available there. Maybe they can play rugby there. Maybe they're trying to find themselves a missus or a husband, and the socialisation is none they're after. So if you're a long way away from urban areas, I'll just change that, as that's a bit embarrassing. You may be, I can't do it. Maybe you might find a clever way of getting staff. Staff are expensive. I said here, 3 to 4 weeks was 3. It changed to 4 weeks paid leave a year. 2007. Matariki now makes it 12 days a year public holidays. So you're paying staff. I know a few people. They say that the staff take their sick leave like annual leave. So essentially, if they can get rid of staff now and not have staff and have themselves and their son working for them, or fewer people, or automate, not having to have the headache of staff. So there's my bit of a collection of my contemporary issues. Again, if Kira wants to jump in, she can. If there's any questions around my labour thoughts, or if she wants to chip in with anything there. Otherwise, there's a few more little bits here. I'll pause for a second.
No, you're good. I think you've covered everything pretty well. So, and no questions at this stage from the chat.
Right, cool. There's a couple of things here. Look, as a little finishing up thing, we need to see and understand how the contemporary issues and niche marketing labour issues relate to all stakeholders, not just the farmer, but we're talking about the processors, the grower organisations, government, whether that's, as I say, MBIE or Ministry of Development, MPI. So just hopefully you've got a pretty well-rounded view. If you go and talk to one person, you've probably got a view, but not the whole view. I think we need to understand the challenges we have to adapt to and be able to make decisions to position us well into the future. So labour, are you going to keep getting labour? You have to find innovative ways to get labour. Are we going to have more automation? Niche marketing, do you need to upskill yourself as a marketer? Do you need to somehow create some uniqueness? I think that what is okay now will be different in the future. There'll be a wide range of viewpoints on the commentary issues of niche market labour issues. I don't think there's a right and a wrong answer. It's just difference. Maybe you might have a view on it, but just bear in mind, again, there isn't an answer schedule. If you look at the ones that we just looked at, 2021, 2020, there's just some ideas of things they want you to say. In the end, we'll be able to track a path forward that allows for our business to be sustainable, taking into account all viewpoints. Not everyone will be happy. I'm a big fan of if everyone's squealing, then maybe the decision's about right. If one group squeals more than the other, then we've probably got the balance wrong. So I don't mind a little bit of people being frustrated because it just means probably we've got the balance right. Then the last one, specific impacts current or potential from niche markets labour issues on your selected primary production systems. This is you are saying how niche marketing and labour issues do or could impact your production system either now or into the future. So in the exam, I don't want my boys to care about labour. We care about how accessing labour affects primary producers. So understand labour, but then make sure you hit the next step to say, and this is what it means for our business. You can Google and might say that Paul Painter from, I'm not sure, Mr. Apple, someone said that there's $100 million loss in the Hawke's Bay due to a lack of labour. So that's the implication of labour on the primary producers or the primary production sector, as opposed to just talking about labour in general. And we don't care about niche markets. We care about, not sure what happened there, I must have got distracted, but we care about, the impact of niche markets for our business. Makes them more sustainable, gives them point of difference, charge higher prices, whatever it may be. So that's my collection of ideas. From there, that was my starting point. I then tried to get my boys to listen to some producers, because if this was my skeleton, then talking to some producers was the meat on the bones. So hopefully, if you're doing the Scholar exam, you've had a yarn to somebody. If you haven't had a yarn to a couple of people who are producers, packers, exporters or something, give someone a phone call, buy them a coffee and a donut tomorrow, Saturday or Sunday, and let them have a chat to you. And then you've got a few things you can add to that sort of collection of ideas maybe come Monday morning. Kerry.
Excellent. No, that was great. Thank you very much. Very comprehensive and lots of examples that the students can use. So we don't have any other questions. But if you do have questions, if you have any others after this, or when you're going back to review this webinar, make sure you get those to your teacher as soon as possible so they can get them answered for you before Monday. This will go back on up. So you'll be able to, go back through and maybe pause on some of the things there that Jared has highlighted. Once again, big thank you to you, Jared, for taking up your time for doing this. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking, and also trying to put something in a comprehensive way that's short and sweet, which covers a whole heap of work. So we thank you very much for your time and for delivering today. And once again, I'd just like to have a big thank you to Study It for ensuring that this has been able to happen for all the sciences, but also for Ag and Hort science especially. So good luck to you, students.
Good luck.
Yeah, and lots of practicing of writing essays, and putting your best foot forward in the exam, and just go in there and have a really good crack at it. You don't know until you're in there. It might be feel better once you're in there and you have a solid idea on the question. You might do better than you think you're going to. So all the best, and once again, thank you.